Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been in corporate finance for some years now. Our office has always had this unwritten rule that when someone moves desks or gets a new office, you handle your own setup. IT comes by to hook up your computer and phone, facilities might help move the heavy furniture if needed, but everything else, your responsibility. Makes sense, right? Who else is going to know where you want your staplers and your family photos? Last week, my cousin got promoted to human resources manager at her company. Different industry, different office culture, but still a professional environment. She'd been gunning for this promotion for months, always talking about how she deserved a private office instead of sitting in the bullpen with everyone else. When she finally got the news, our whole family heard about it. Group text after group text about her new title, her new salary, her new office with actual walls and a door that closes. The move happened on Monday. I didn't hear from her that day, which seemed normal. Moving offices is usually pretty busy. That morning, though, my phone started blowing up. She sent me a message asking if I could believe what her workplace was doing. I asked her what happened. She told me they just dumped all her boxes on the floor and left. I asked who did that. She said the moving team, facilities, whoever was supposed to set up her office. I asked her to clarify what she meant by setting up her office. She explained that she spent all day yesterday unpacking boxes and arranging furniture and that her back was killing her. I stared at my phone for a solid minute. She expected someone else to unpack her personal items and decorate her office. I thought maybe I was misunderstanding. I asked if facilities moved the boxes from her old desk to her new office. She said they just dropped everything on the floor in the middle of the room and didn't even put the boxes on her desk. I asked if they moved her desk and chairs and filing cabinets. She said obviously they did, but they left all her personal stuff in boxes. I pointed out that it was her stuff. She fired back that they could have at least opened the boxes and put things on the shelves, and that she had to do everything herself, which took 6 hours. 6 hours to unpack some office supplies and personal items seemed excessive. But I wasn't about to argue that point. I asked if anyone offered to help. She said nobody even came by to check on her, and that her new assistant walked past twice without saying anything. I suggested that her assistant probably figured she wanted to arrange things herself. She insisted that helping her was literally her assistant's job. I asked if she meant unpacking boxes was her job. She said yes, to assist her. I called her because this was getting ridiculous and texting wasn't cutting it anymore. She answered and I told her I just wanted to make sure I was understanding this right, that she was upset facilities didn't unpack her personal belongings. She said not just facilities, but anyone, and that she was a manager now with people who were supposed to help with this stuff. I asked her to clarify what exactly she needed help with, deciding where she wanted her desk calendar. She said it was about respect and that when you get promoted to a management position, there's a certain level of service that should come with that. I asked if by service she meant someone organizing her pencil drawer. She accused me of making it sound stupid. I told her I was just trying to understand what she expected. She said she expected that when she walked into her new office, everything would be set up and ready to go, with her desk organized, supplies in the drawers, and pictures hung on the walls, and asked if that was really so unreasonable. I told her kind of, yeah, because how would anyone else know where she wanted her stuff? She said they could ask. I asked if she wanted someone to follow her around while she pointed at things and told them where to put each item. She insisted that was literally what assistants do. I explained that administrative assistants schedule meetings and handle correspondence. They don't decorate your office like some kind of corporate interior design service. She said, well, at her level, they should. That phrase, at her level, really got me. She'd been a manager for exactly 3 days. She told me to forget it, that I clearly didn't get it because I'd never worked in human resources. I reminded her that I'd worked in corporate offices for 8 years, moved desks, 4 times and offices twice, and asked her to guess who set them up. She said, "Well, then my company didn't value its employees." I shot back that my company valued employees who could unpack a box without supervision. She said whatever, and that she was going to talk to her director about this because it was unacceptable. I asked if she was seriously going to complain to her boss that nobody decorated her office for her. She corrected me and said she was going to raise concerns about inadequate support for new managers during transitions. I wished her good luck with that. She hung up. For the next 2 days, the family group chat was silent from her end, which was unusual. Then Thursday afternoon, I got a text from my aunt. My aunt asked if I heard what happened with my cousin. I said no and asked what. She told me that my cousin complained to her director about the office situation. I asked what happened next. My aunt said he apparently looked very confused and asked what she meant. My cousin explained that nobody helped her set up her office. He said that was standard procedure, that everyone sets up their own workspace. I said that was shocking. My aunt continued that my cousin pushed back and said that as a manager, she should have additional support. The director told her that being a manager means taking more responsibility, not less. I said that was brutal. My aunt said it got worse. He apparently told my cousin that if she needs help unpacking boxes, maybe management isn't the right fit. I was stunned. My aunt confirmed it was true and that my cousin was mortified and wouldn't talk to anyone. I felt a little bad, but mostly I was amazed that she'd actually gone through with the complaint. Friday morning, my phone rang. It was my cousin. She told me she needed to apologize. I said, okay. She admitted she was being ridiculous and that her director made that very clear. I asked what he said exactly. She told me that managers are expected to handle their own basic tasks and that complaining about unpacking boxes demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of professional expectations at this level. I said, ouch. She agreed and then told me he assigned her to help coordinate the office move for their entire department next month. He said it would be a good learning experience about what facilities actually does versus what employees do themselves. I laughed. I told her that was actually pretty perfect. She said she was glad I thought so because she was going to be helping 70 people move desks. I asked if she was going to make sure they all understood they needed to pack and unpack their own stuff. She said yes, that would be very clearly communicated. She's been pretty quiet in the family group chat since then. Before I moved into this apartment, I was going through one of the most stressful periods of my life. I had been searching for a place to live for weeks, viewing room after room. Some were way beyond my budget, others were in terrible condition or located in areas that just felt wrong. Every rejection email, every too expensive listing, every sketchy landlord wore me down a little more. I was starting to panic about where I would end up. Then a mutual friend mentioned that her friend was looking for a new roommate. Her previous roommate was moving out, and she needed someone to fill the spot quickly. I barely knew this woman. We had maybe crossed paths twice at group gatherings, but at that point, I was willing to take almost anything. I went to see the apartment and was honestly relieved. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect for getting to work, and the place itself was clean and spacious. I agreed almost immediately. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. She was friendly and welcoming, showing me around the neighborhood, explaining how things worked in the building. I felt genuinely grateful that she had given me this opportunity when I needed it most. Maybe that gratitude made me too willing to excuse things that bothered me. It started small. She would walk into my room without knocking, just stroll in like it was a shared space. Sometimes she would lie down on my bed while chatting with me, putting her bare feet up on my blankets after walking around the apartment all day. I noticed my snacks disappearing from the kitchen, and when I checked, I would find the empty wrappers in the trash. She borrowed my things without asking, my hairdryer, my phone charger, even my clothes a few times. I tried to handle it gently at first. One evening when she flopped onto my bed again, I laughed and made a comment about being really weird about my bed, saying I couldn't sleep if I knew someone else sat on it. She just laughed it off and kept doing it. Another time I mentioned that I had bought those specific cookies for myself as a treat, and she smiled and said, "We were like family now. What's mine is yours." But it only seemed to work one way. When the weeks went on, the violations felt more invasive. I started feeling uncomfortable in my own space, so I began locking my bedroom door whenever I left the apartment. She never mentioned it directly, but I started getting this creeping feeling when I came home. Little things would be slightly moved, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. A book facing a different direction. My closet door not quite closed the way I left it. One night, I worked up the courage to ask her directly if she happened to have a key to my room. She immediately got defensive and asked why I would even ask that. I tried to explain that I had noticed some things seemed different when I came home, and I was wondering if maybe maintenance had come in or something. She told me I was being paranoid and said nobody was going through my stuff. She added that asking was honestly kind of insulting. I tried to clarify that I didn't mean it like that, but she cut me off and said I was imagining things and needed to relax. I dropped it after that, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. A few weeks later, she mentioned she was going out with friends for the evening. After she left, I called a friend of mine who works in locksmith services and security. He came over and changed the lock on my bedroom door. I paid him in cash and felt a genuine sense of relief when he handed me the new set of keys. Finally, I could feel secure in my own room. For a few days, nothing happened. Then one afternoon while I was at work, my phone started blowing up with messages from her. They came in rapid succession, each one angrier than the last. She was furious that I had changed the lock without her permission, said I had disrespected her and her home, claimed that the building staff had questioned her about unauthorized modifications, and embarrassed her in front of the management. When I got home that evening, she was waiting for me in the living room. She immediately started yelling about how dare I change that lock without asking her first. I told her it was my bedroom and I had the right to feel safe in my own space. She shot back that this was her apartment, that she let me move in when nobody else would take me, and asked if this was how I repaid her, by going behind her back. I said I didn't go behind her back, I just changed the lock on my private room because I didn't feel comfortable. She said I had no right and that she had already talked to management about it. She told me I was going to have to move out. I said fine, I would talk to them myself then. She said good luck with that and added that they were on her side. The next morning I went straight to the building office before work. I explained the situation to the property manager, expecting to be told I had broken some rule. Instead, what they told me changed everything. The manager said that I was allowed to change the lock on my private bedroom. That was within tenant rights when I wasn't modifying common areas or exterior doors. But then the manager said they should tell me something else. My roommate had complaints filed against her before. Multiple complaints from previous roommates, actually. Bullying behavior, taking their belongings, creating hostile living situations. One person even reported possible theft. I asked if they were serious. They said completely serious and added that if I was having problems with her, I had every right to file a formal complaint. They had been documenting issues with her for a while now. I filed the complaint that same day. Within 24 hours, an official notice was delivered to her. I was home when it arrived and I watched her face change from confusion to rage when she read it. She looked at me and I could see she knew exactly who had filed it. Since then, she barely speaks to me. We pass each other in the hallway in complete silence. The apartment feels tense and cold, but honestly, I feel more at peace now than I have in months. My door has a lock that only I control. My things stay where I put them. I can come home without that crawling sensation of wondering if someone has been in my space. My dad got transferred to a new city for work at the end of sophomore year. We moved 3 states away, which meant I had to start junior year at Lincoln High, knowing absolutely nobody. The first week was rough. I spent lunch periods sitting alone at whatever table had space, trying to figure out where I fit in. By the third day, I noticed patterns. Certain groups always sat at the same tables, like they owned them. But the cafeteria didn't have assigned seating, so I figured anywhere with an empty chair was fair game. On Thursday, I grabbed my lunch tray and scanned the room. Most tables were packed, but there was one near the windows with only two kids sitting at the far end. I sat down on the opposite side, leaving plenty of room. I was eating my sandwich when a girl with perfectly styled hair appeared next to the table. She had her arms crossed and was staring down at me. She told me I was in her seat. I apologized and said I didn't see anyone sitting there. She explained that she didn't sit there during lunch, but after lunch, and that this was her table. I looked around the cafeteria again. Every single table was full of students eating and talking. I pointed out that lunch wasn't over yet and said I'd move when she actually needed the seat. She insisted she needed it now and wanted me gone immediately. I told her I was still eating and asked for about 10 minutes. Her expression changed. She asked if I had any idea who she was. She went on to say that her mom ran the entire English department and that this had been her table since freshman year. I acknowledged that, but said I was just trying to eat lunch and would be done soon. She demanded I get out of her seat right away. I looked down at my tray and kept eating. I wasn't trying to cause problems, but I also wasn't going to get pushed around by someone acting like they owned public school furniture. The two other kids at the table grabbed their stuff and left without saying anything. They looked uncomfortable, like they knew what was coming. She pulled out her phone and started typing. She told me I was making a huge mistake and that she'd given me a chance to leave nicely. She turned and walked away. I finished my sandwich and moved on to my chips. Maybe 5 minutes passed before she came back with 3 other girls. They formed a semicircle around my end of the table. She pointed out that I was still there. I confirmed I was still eating. One of her friends said seriously that I should just move and that this wasn't worth it. I asked worth what, pointing out it was just a lunch table in a public cafeteria. Another friend insisted it was her table, and that everyone knew that. I said, well, I was new, so I didn't know, but also that I didn't really care. I added that there was no rule saying this was anyone's personal table. She declared that the rule was that she said it was hers, and that was the only rule that mattered. I asked, says who? She answered, says me, explaining that when she wanted something, she got it, and that was how things worked there. I said cool, and that I wanted to finish my lunch without being harassed. A third friend warned me I was going to regret being so stubborn. I said I doubted it. She stepped closer, leaning down so her face was near mine. She told me this was my last warning, to get up and move, or she'd make me move. I told her to go ahead. I didn't think she'd actually do anything physical. Maybe yell at me. Maybe go get a teacher. Maybe just stand there looking angry. Instead, she walked around behind me. I was taking a drink of water when I felt her hands grab the back of my collar. She yanked backward hard, pulling my head back with the fabric. At the exact same moment, one of her friends was standing right behind me, holding a large coffee cup from the cart outside. When she jerked me backward, the friend stumbled forward. The entire cup of hot coffee poured down the back of my shirt. The pain hit instantly. I screamed and jumped up from the table, pulling at my shirt to get it away from my skin. It felt like my entire back was on fire. The coffee was scalding, soaking through my clothes and burning my skin. Students nearby started yelling. Someone ran toward the cafeteria entrance, shouting for a teacher. I was crying, trying to peel my shirt off, and she was still standing behind me with her hand on my collar. A teacher pushed through the crowd of students. The teacher asked what happened. She let go of my collar and took a step back. She claimed I wouldn't move from her table and that she was just trying to get my attention. The teacher asked if she'd grabbed me. The teacher looked at the friend holding the empty coffee cup. The teacher asked if she'd thrown that on me. The friend with the coffee insisted no, it was an accident, and that I had jumped up too fast and it spilled. The teacher looked at the coffee cup on the floor, then at me, clutching my back and crying. The teacher said we needed to get me to the nurse right away. Another teacher arrived and started moving students away from the area. She tried to slip into the crowd, but the first teacher pointed directly at her. The teacher told her not to move, and that she and her friends needed to stay exactly where they were. The nurse had me take off my shirt so she could look at my back. She took one look and immediately called my parents. She explained I had first-degree burns across my shoulders and upper back, and that some areas looked like they might be second-degree. She said my parents needed to take me to the emergency room. My mom arrived at the school 20 minutes later. When the nurse showed her my back, my mom's face went white. There were red patches and blisters forming across my shoulder blades. My dad got there 10 minutes after that and he was furious. The principal had already called everyone involved down to her office. She kept insisting it was an accident, that she didn't mean for the coffee to spill. But the principal had already talked to witnesses. More importantly, 3 different students had recorded the whole thing on their phones. The video showed everything. Her grabbing my collar from behind, yanking me backward. Her friend standing right there with the coffee cup, the liquid pouring down my back. The principal announced this was assault and that she had no choice but to call the police. Her face went pale. She insisted it was just an accident and that she didn't mean for me to get hurt. The principal pointed out that the video clearly showed her grabbing me and pulling me backward, and that wasn't an accident. Her mother showed up within minutes of the call. She stormed into the principal's office demanding explanations. Her mother insisted this was completely blown out of proportion, that it was just an accident between students, and there was no reason to involve police. The principal explained that her daughter had physically assaulted another student, that the student now had burns requiring medical treatment, and this was beyond what could be handled with school discipline. Her mother argued that the new girl was sitting at her daughter's table, refused to move when asked politely, and that her daughter was just trying to get her attention. My dad cut in, stating that her daughter had grabbed his child from behind and caused burns all over her back because of a cafeteria table, and there was no excuse for that. The police arrived about 30 minutes later. They interviewed everyone separately. They watched the videos that students had sent to the principal. The evidence was overwhelming. One officer talked to her in front of her mother. The officer explained that based on the video evidence and witness statements, they were placing her under arrest for assault and battery. She started crying. Her mother protested that she was 17 years old and this would ruin her future. The officer replied that she had caused significant injury to another student and that actions have consequences. They put handcuffs on her right there in the principal's office and led her out. Students in the hallway stopped and stared as she was walked out to the police car. Her mother followed, screaming about lawsuits and unfair treatment. The principal expelled her that same day. It was in the student handbook that physical violence resulting in injury was grounds for immediate expulsion. My parents took me to the emergency room. The doctor confirmed second-degree burns on my upper back and first-degree burns across my shoulders. They gave me prescription pain medication and special bandages. The doctor said I probably have scars. Over the next week, the district attorney's office contacted my parents. Because of the severity of my injuries and the clear evidence of intent, they were pressing criminal charges. Her preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. The judge looked at the videos, the medical reports, and the witness statements. The judge stated this was a deliberate act of violence that caused serious injury, and given the evidence, was ordering the defendant to juvenile detention pending trial. She ended up taking a plea deal. 6 months in juvenile detention for assault and battery. Her mother tried everything to get the charges reduced or dismissed. She hired expensive lawyers. She tried to claim I had provoked her daughter. None of it worked. The videos made it impossible to deny what happened. 2 weeks after she was sentenced, her mother resigned from her position at the school. There was talk that the school board had pressured her to leave. Parents didn't want someone with that kind of judgment influencing their kids' education. I still have scars on my back from the burns. They've faded a bit, but you can still see them clearly. I've been taking my son to this weekly community event at our local petting zoo for about 3 months now. It's one of those things where they set up special photo opportunities with the animals, and it's free for families with toddlers. My son is 2.5, and honestly, these outings have become as much about teaching him patience and social skills as they are about having fun. Plus, at 8 months pregnant with our second, I figure I should soak up these one-on-one moments while I still can. The events are always busy, but today was packed. Must have been the nice weather. We got there about 20 minutes before the photo session started and joined the line. My son was doing pretty well considering we'd been standing there for 15 minutes. Sure, he was getting antsy and kept tugging at my hand, but I kept reminding him we had to wait our turn. That's the whole point of these outings really. learning that the world doesn't revolve around you, that other people exist, that sometimes you just have to wait. The family in front of us finished up their photos, and I felt my son perk up with excitement. This was it. We were next. I started guiding him forward when suddenly this tiny blur shot past me. A little girl, probably around the same age as my son, had broken free from somewhere behind us and was now climbing right into the photo area. She started grabbing at the props and reaching toward the rabbit they had out for the pictures. I turned around to see where she came from. 3 families back in line stood an older woman, maybe in her 60s, who was looking at the scene with a vague expression of acknowledgement but zero urgency. She called out an apology, saying she was so sorry about her granddaughter running ahead. But here's the thing, she didn't move at all, just stood there holding her position in line while her grandkid ran wild at the front. I responded nicely, telling her it was no problem and that it was totally normal for a toddler to do that. I explained I'd just wait a second for her to grab her granddaughter so that my child wouldn't get distracted when we went up for our turn. I said it nicely because, look, toddlers escape. It happens. My own kid has bolted on me plenty of times. But you go get them, right? You don't just stand there and apologize from a distance like that fixes the problem. The woman finally started moving, but calling it moving is generous. She inched forward at a pace that would make a snail impatient, squeezing past the other families in line. And the whole time she wasn't even looking at her granddaughter. She was looking down at her phone, swiping and tapping. My son was starting to whine next to me, pulling harder on my hand. We've been practicing waiting in line for weeks now, and here we were, next in line and yet again not going. I could feel my back aching from standing, my ankles swelling in my shoes, and I was doing everything I could to keep my composure. The woman reached the front and positioned herself right in front of her granddaughter, who was still touching everything in sight. But instead of picking her up or redirecting her, she held up her phone and asked if she could just snap her photos real quick, since she was already up there. She wanted to jump the entire line because her grandkid had run ahead and she'd been too slow to retrieve her quickly. I told her that wouldn't be fair since there was a line and we were all teaching our toddlers how to wait in line properly. Her whole demeanor changed instantly. She scoffed, actually scoffed, like I was the one being unreasonable. Then she made this big show of slowly, dramatically bending down to pick up her granddaughter. The huffing started immediately, loud, exaggerated sighs, and then she started the slowest walk back to her spot in line that I have ever witnessed. Each step was deliberate, dragging it out, making sure everyone saw how put out she was. I thanked her sweetly and added that we wouldn't want this generation to grow up thinking they're entitled not to wait in line just because they don't feel like it. I said it with the sweetest smile I could manage. She shot me a look but said nothing and continued her glacial journey back to her spot. Finally, we got our turn. My son was so excited he could barely stand still, and we got some adorable photos with a bunny. The whole thing took maybe 2 minutes, and then we moved on to the rest of the activities. I spent the next little while questioning myself. Was I too harsh? Was I being unreasonable because of pregnancy hormones? I'm not usually that direct with strangers, but something about her attitude just set me off. The entitlement of it. Not just letting her grandkid cut, but the expectation that it was fine, that I should just accept it, and then acting like I was a villain for saying no. About 10 minutes later, we were at the toy area where they have these foam building blocks. My son was playing with a purple one when another little girl walked up and smashed him in the head with a different block, because she wanted the purple one he had. He started crying, I scooped him up, and immediately the other mother rushed over looking horrified. She apologized over and over, explaining that her daughter just grabs things and that she is trying to teach her, but she's in that difficult phase where they don't quite understand sharing yet. I told her not to worry about it at all and that my kid had done the same thing to other children before. I reminded her that they're just toddlers and this stuff happens all the time. She looked so relieved, and we both laughed about it. Her daughter handed my son the block she'd hit him with as an apology. He stopped crying, and they actually played together for a few minutes after that. That's when I knew it wasn't just hormones. The difference was night and day. This mother acknowledged the problem, took immediate action, and was genuinely apologetic. She didn't make excuses or act like I was inconveniencing her by expecting basic courtesy. That's all I'd wanted from the grandmother earlier. Just basic acknowledgement that cutting in line isn't okay and a genuine effort to correct it. We stayed at the event for another hour, and my son had a blast. On the drive home, he fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted and happy. I felt validated somehow, not because I'd won some confrontation, but because I'd stood up for a simple principle. Wait your turn. Teach your kids to wait their turn. Don't act entitled to special treatment because it's easier or because you feel like it. I have two kids, 8 and 10, and I wanted them to grow up somewhere they could be kids. The homeowners association in this neighborhood seemed pretty laid back at first. Then, about 6 months after we moved in, when Karen bought the house at the corner of our street, I first met her on a Saturday afternoon when my kids were kicking a soccer ball around in our front yard. My younger one accidentally sent it rolling toward her driveway. Before I could even walk over to get it, she stormed out of her house. She told me that the ball better not have touched her property. I explained that it just rolled over there and that I would grab it. She snapped back that I needed to control my children and that if anything damaged her landscaping, I would be hearing from her lawyer. I picked up the ball and stared at her. Her landscaping consisted of some basic shrubs and standard grass that looked identical to everyone else's on the block. I pointed out that it was just a soccer ball that weighed less than a pound. She said she did not care what it weighed and told me to keep it away from her house. She turned and walked back inside, slamming her door. My kids stood there looking confused. My older kid asked if she was always that mean. I told them I did not know, but that we should play in the common area from now on. That is exactly what we did. The common area was huge, at least 2 acres of open grass, with a few trees scattered around the edges. It was designed for residents to use. My kids would go out there after school and on weekends with their friends. Sometimes they played soccer, sometimes football, sometimes just ran around being kids. Karen started showing up the first time she walked right into the middle of their soccer game. She announced that the children were making too much noise and that she could hear them from her house. My older kid looked at me, unsure what to say. I walked over. I reminded her that they were playing in the common area, and that was what it was for. She complained that they were being disruptive and that this was a quiet neighborhood. I told her it was 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday, and that they were allowed to play. She looked at me but left. That was not the end of it though. She started coming out every single time kids were in the common area. She would stand on the edge and watch them like a hawk, occasionally yelling about noise or telling them they were playing too rough. One afternoon, my younger kid kicked the soccer ball and it rolled about 15 feet from where Karen's property line ended, nowhere near touching her yard. She lost it. She shouted that if that ball came near her house one more time, I would be getting a letter from her attorney. She said she was documenting every incident. I left. I told her to go ahead and send whatever letter she wanted. She turned red and walked away. My kid looked worried and asked if she could really do that. I told them that no, she could not sue someone because a ball rolled near her house. I said not to worry about it. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the Homeowners Association. It was signed by the president, who was best friends with Karen. I had seen them having coffee together on her porch multiple times. The letter said that, effective immediately, children were prohibited from playing football in the common area due to safety concerns and potential property damage. It also mentioned that soccer and other high-impact sports would be reviewed for similar restrictions. I read it 3 times, then I pulled up the Federal Fair Housing Act on my laptop. The law is very clear. You cannot restrict children from using common areas in housing communities. It is considered discriminatory. I wrote a response that same night and emailed it to the entire Homeowners Association board, copying every email address listed on our neighborhood website. I explained that their new rule violated federal housing law. I cited the specific statute. I pointed out that common areas in planned communities must be equally accessible to all residents, including children. I mentioned that attempting to enforce this rule could result in legal action against the Homeowners Association and personal liability for board members. I ended the email by saying I expected the rule to be withdrawn immediately and that I would be monitoring the situation closely. The response came 2 days later. The rule was withdrawn. The email claimed it had been issued in error due to a miscommunication. Karen was furious. She started parking her business inventory in the guest parking spaces. See, she ran a used car dealership and thought our neighborhood was a good place to store her overflow vehicles. She would take up 3, sometimes 4 guest spots with cars that had dealer plates and for sale signs in the windows. Our homeowners association rules clearly said that guest parking was for guests only and that commercial vehicles were prohibited. I watched her do this for weeks. Other neighbors started complaining because they had guests who needed somewhere to park. I did not say anything at first. I figured karma would catch up eventually. It did. Another neighbor, someone who worked in code enforcement for the city, filed a complaint. Running a car dealership out of a residential neighborhood requires special permits that Karen definitely did not have. The city showed up, talked to her, and told her she had 2 choices. She could move all dealer inventory off the property immediately, or she could face daily fines. She moved the cars. She also got cited by the Homeowners Association for violating parking rules and received a fine of $200. My kids still play in the common area every weekend. Karen stays inside now. Every once in a while I see her curtains move when the kids are out there, but she does not come outside anymore. The Homeowners Association president stepped down last month. I heard several residents had demanded her removal after the attempted children ban. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.